Now to a superb piece in today's Australian by Nick Cater on the welfare dependence of the renewable sector. Nick writes, the Australian Renewable Energy Agency, ARENA, prefer to avoid the loaded term subsidy. It speaks instead of accelerating the pace of pre-commercial innovation by supporting improvements in the competitiveness of renewable energy. ARENA has been handing out welfare checks to pre-competitive businesses at the rate of roughly one a week since it was established by the Gillard government back in 2012. Last week, Energy Minister Chris Bowen and Anthony Albanese travelled to the Hunter Valley to announce ARENA's 642nd grant. It was a whopper, a cool $1 billion to help a startup company that's backed by Mike Cannon-Brookes and Malcolm Turnbull to build a solar panel manufacturing plant. Yes, those two really need that acceleration of pre-commercial innovation, don't they? Nick Cater, columnist for The Australian and senior fellow at the Menzies Research Centre, joins me now. Nick, that is such a fantastic piece. I encourage everybody, get today's Australian, read it. Tell me though, tell the audience now, how much are renewable subsidies costing taxpayers?
You want the full figure? I couldn't possibly give you that, Rita. There's so many subsidies coming from so many different directions.
No one
this
can.
one body, ARENA, ARENA, which was set up in 2012 by the Gillard government to sort of kickstart renewable energy, they've given away $2.3 billion already, plus another $1 billion for Mike Cannon-Brookes and Malcolm Turnbull's backed company that's going to supposedly build solar panels. And that's 642 individual grants. I mean, it's just extraordinary because the thing is, Rita, I thought Chris Bowen and the CSIRO were telling us that renewable energy is the cheapest form of electricity there is. Well, if that's the case, why on earth would you need to subsidise it? I mean, the thing would just walk in. And if it's the big thing, this technology, this is a thing we're all going to need in the rest of the 21st century. It's going to be so much in demand. Don't you think that Mike Cannon-Brookes might stick up a lazy billion of his own into this? I mean, they're very shy about putting their money in their own pocket. They're putting their hands in their own pockets, Rita, and not so shy about putting their hands in the taxpayer's pocket, as far as I can see.
Well, you're right. Renewable energy is welfare dependent as well as weather dependent. It suffers from a condition a psychologist might recognise as dependent personality disorder, a pervasive and excessive need to be taken care of, leading to a submissive and clinging behaviour, fear of separation, and difficulty making decisions without reassurance from others. Nick, the way you describe this sector, you make renewables sound like some sort of a toxic relationship we need to escape.
I think we do. I mean, they live in a universe that doesn't work like the rest of the economy. You know, their first stop is to go and see what they can get out of the government to kickstart their businesses. Whereas most companies, of course, have to raise their own capital. So it's become, I think, like a dependency relationship, like welfare dependency, because they're so used to doing this now. They've been doing it for 15 years or more that now they don't even think, well, we might have to find that capital ourselves. But, you know, I just think it does blow Chris Bowen's claim out of the water that this is somehow the best and cheapest form of electricity. Because if it was, well, it would just be able to stand on its own 2 feet, wouldn't it? But, of course, it can't. It can't. And what we talked about in that column, you know, the $3.2 billion, that's just the start of it. You've got all the money that they get in renewable energy certificates every time they power up their windmills or solar panels, you know, plus all the subsidies they get from, you know, local councils have to help them expand the roads so that they can bring the turbines in. They don't pay full dollar for that either. So right the way along the line from cradle to grave, we're subsidising them. And, you know, I just don't think that's
and all
right,
the infrastructure
really
that we're building, all the infrastructure we're building, that's why the bills are skyrocketing. And you can see why so many of the people who are investing in that sector are dead set against nuclear, because if you've got nuclear energy, if you've got a reliable source of energy that is not weather dependent, then you don't really need renewables, do you? It makes renewables obsolete in a way. Now, moving along, Facebook's parent company, Meta, is dodging an estimated $262 million worth of tax to Australia by shifting revenue made from Aussie ads to Ireland. This is despite $1.25 billion from Australian businesses going to Meta. They're advertising on their platform, but Meta's sending $1.03 billion of that to another group as payment for advertising inventory and declaring they only made a profit of $77 million to the Australian government. And Nick, it's not just Meta. We've got Apple, Google and Microsoft all claiming that just 5 to 20% of their revenue is taxable. Lefties like to say that the rich don't pay their fair share of taxes. That's not normally true, but it is true when it comes to big tech.
They seem to have no allegiance to Australia whatsoever, or no loyalty, which is fine, except that when it comes to the political debate, of course, they want to buy right into it. You know, they'll take one side in the voice debate, for instance, or the transgender debate, and, you know, they'll take people off if they disagree with that view. Well, you can't have it both ways. I mean, if you want to be part of the Australian political debate by allowing stuff on and not allowing others and setting your algorithm and so forth, then you pay your taxes fair and square. You don't do this, it's perfectly legal, I guess, but it's just not really ethical or fair, and just shows this is not a company operating in good faith towards Australians, I think.
Now, Nick, let's talk about Foreign Minister Penny Wong. She's been mocked far and wide. She was ratioed on X. That's something you don't want to happen to you on social media. And why? Because she posted this on Easter Sunday about celebrating something called Trans Day of Visibility. Among the more than 6,000 responses she got was this from Sal Grover, who wrote, "Yeah, we know exactly what you stand with, men, or who you stand with, men. May I remind you that other people have rights, and demanding women give up our sex-based rights for men who claim to be women is many things, but it sure as SHIT isn't equality." Another popular response was this from Polybard, who wrote, "It's Easter, and please explain how you can commit to trans rights without destroying women's rights." Nobody has yet. If you scroll through those 6,000 odd messages, there aren't too many that are in support, Nick. What would possess her to post this on Easter Sunday, especially after the Biden White House copped so much heat for doing the same thing?
It's an incredible lapse of judgment for her. I mean, I presume she knew it was Easter Sunday. She might not. She might not be a churchgoer. I don't know. But
she would.
You know, I mean,
of course she would. You don't need to be a churchgoer to know it's Easter Sunday.
Well, you do. It's hard to find a bottle shop open, right? You know that. That's Easter Sunday, and long may it stay that way, to be honest. But look, this is wrong on so many levels, Rita. First of all, this organisation, well, they called Transvisibility something or other. You know, they must have known that March 31st was Easter Sunday.
I think it is.
Oh, I'm sorry to pass out misinformation on, but whatever they are, they knew. They must have known it was Easter Sunday on March the 31st, and they've deliberately scheduled it. Now, that's an insult to Christians. It's an insult to our Judeo-Christian heritage, and that's wrong. But for Penny Wong to repost it, the thing is, doesn't Penny Wong, maybe somebody should point out that we actually had a referendum on identity politics last year, and she lost. Her side lost. I mean, that's what The Voice was. It was about saying, well, everybody has the same rights. Everybody deserves equal respect in this country. Nobody deserves special respect. And this whole identity politics thing is so out of kilter with what most Australians think that I think Penny Wong is just proving once again that she and the Albanese government really are just way out of touch with ordinary people.
Well, the activists will tell you, well, this day has been on the 31st of March for 10, 15 years, so they weren't intending to take over Easter Sunday, but it has coincided with Easter Sunday this year, but there's no reason for politicians to be posting messages acknowledging this day on Easter Sunday. I mean, that's where the idiocy comes in. You expect the activists to be activists. You would expect the politicians to have a little bit more sense. And there are so many other days recognising this group. It's not like they're invisible for the other 364 days. Now, let's go to the New York Post. They're reporting that ISIS-K terrorists could very easily make their way across the US's completely unprotected southern border to carry out a Moscow-style terror attack. Of course, they killed some 143 innocent people there earlier this month. We've got, Nick, millions of undocumented migrants entering the US. Why wouldn't a terrorist cell take advantage of the Biden administration's losing control of that southern border? That's a very easy way to enter the country if you've got evil intent.
Well, that's right. And there was a case, I think a week or so back, as you might recall, where they'd arrested some Hamas operatives who tried to come across that way. So it's wide open. This is the problem. This is why we have borders, of course, to keep our people safe, to keep our citizens safe. And this is a terrible lapse of the duty of care by the Biden administration. We seem to sort of think that the ISIS terrorism thing is all in the past, Rita, but look, there are dozens of attacks this year alone caused by Muslim extremists around the world. It's just that they don't seem to make the papers anymore. Perhaps they should, to remind us that they haven't suddenly gone quiet. They haven't suddenly turned over a new leaf. These people are really very, very driven by this wicked ideology, and they are driven to do terrible acts, and we need to be alert all the time.
Nick Cater, thank you so much for your time this evening.